Good morning. My message today, March 29th, 2020, is based on the Gospel of John, chapter 11. It's the story of Jesus encountering Mary and Martha in their grief and bringing their brother Lazarus back from the dead. The January recital given by Emma Book on her violin made me weep with tears of appreciation and gratitude for the gift of music and her gifts as a musician. Her ability to take the violin and make beautiful music with it got me to thinking about violins, trees, God, and grief. To make the best violin, you need at least 3 key components: nature, to make the right kind of tree; a luthier, to make the instrument; and a musician, to play it, to make the music come from that instrument. The wood that went to make the Stradivari violins comes from alpine forests in northern Italy. Antonio Stradivari was known as the Lord of the Strings. He was born in 1644, and we know he died December 18th, 1737. He was an Italian luthier, a crafter of stringed instruments, such as violins and cellos, guitars and harps, and he himself played the violin. It is estimated that Stradivari produced 1,116 instruments, 960 of which were violins. Only around 650 instruments survived, including roughly 450 to 512 violins. They are world-renowned for their uniquely beautiful sound quality. A Stradivari sold at auction in 2011 went for over $15 million. There are several theories as to why that is, and the one that intrigues me the most is the dense wood theory. Before and during Antonio Stradivari's life, the oldest trees in the forest of the Alps, near where he lived, had grown to maturity, having survived what climatologists call a little ice age. In a science article in the New York Times by Stephen Yin in December of 2016, titled "The Brilliance of a Stradivari Violin Might Rest Within Its Wood," Mr. Yin wrote that in 2003, Dr. Gracino Meyer said Stradivari's secret had to do with the fact that he lived during an extremely cold period known as a Little Ice Age, and that the trees around him were growing differently, slowly. Researchers also discovered that 1/3 of the wood component, known as hemicellulose, had decomposed in a Stradivari's instruments. And because hemicellulose naturally absorbs a lot of moisture, the effect was that the instruments had about 25% less water in them than more recent models. This is fundamentally important because the less moisture, the more brilliant the sound, said Joseph Nagavari, a luthier and a professor emeritus of biochemistry at Texas A&M University. You see, every year of a tree's life, it grows as a cylinder, upward and thicker, making a ring of wood. Depending on the temperature and the weather and the severity of the seasons, the amount of growth is either greater, producing a thicker ring, or lesser, resulting in a visibly thinner ring. The thinner the ring, the less growth has occurred, because of the climate, the cold or the drought conditions, less sunlight, less water than in other years. The thinner the rings, the denser the wood, the drier the wood. And the denser and drier the wood, the higher quality in the sound that wood's instruments can later produce. During the Little Ice Age, leading up to Stradivari's life, less sunlight meant colder temperatures, and that meant less tree growth, thinner rings for the forests where he would make his music come from. Grief has often been likened to a hard winter. The days meld into each other, and the zest one felt for life seems to disappear along with life's beauty and light in the brain fog and inertia of a complex and difficult grief. Mary and Martha were experiencing a hard grief in the illness and death of their beloved only brother, Lazarus, complicated by the inexplicable and nearly inexcusable absence of Jesus. I can imagine Mary and Martha saying in whispered concern outside of Lazarus' hearing in the days leading up to and then after his untimely death, Jesus healed others, total strangers, even Gentiles. So why isn't he here now? Why isn't he here for us? Have you ever wondered where God was, or why his silence and seeming absence during your hardest times? I have. Perhaps this past year has been a long, hard winter, emotionally or financially or spiritually, as you grieve losses that seem to you like Mary and Martha's seemed to them, indefensible, given what you know about God and God's love for you. Perhaps now, in the middle of this worldwide viral threat from the COVID-19 pandemic, you are sick or scared that you or a fragile loved one will lose a job or a home or your life savings or even your life. I am. And I have endured such seasons, such long, hard winters of grief, far longer than the sisters, Mary and Martha's week of intense sorrow and spiritual pain and loss. Like the trees in the forest that were chopped down to make violins and cellos by Antonio Stradivari, we can feel like Ice Age trees, thin-ringed, with little growth year after barren, difficult year, dry and dense with the cold, bitter, long winter of fear or sorrow or anger or feeling distant from God or of grief. Those Ice Age trees were the ones hand-picked by Stradivari to make the most brilliant music the world has seldom known. They were carved by the master luthier, Antonio Stradivari. Jesus tells his disciples in John chapter 11 what he later tells Martha and Mary when he was told that Lazarus, his friend, was sick, in fact, dying, and then dead. This sickness will not lead to an end with death, but is for the glory of God. It is what Jesus tells the crowd and family gathered there as he wept too. Death will be swallowed up by life. I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? Jesus asked one of his disciples, Martha. Jesus asks us this same question now in our winter of griefs, of worry, of fear. Do you believe this? Perhaps God knew and told his angels, this ice age winter will not end with the death of an alpine forest, but will produce a forest of violins that will make men and angels and perhaps once again even God weep. With the love of music, with compassion, overcome by its beauty, in solidarity with the pathos and passion of human life. So God brought an Antonio Stradivari into the world to live through and create and die in an alpine Italian winter, to make the forest music come alive for all of us. So I believe God sent his only Son, Jesus, into the world to take our griefs, our losses, even our illnesses and deaths, and make them ring with the music of faith and hope, of love. This is the music of the divine life of God in each of us, a life that conquers death, just as music conquers it. Stradivari has been dead for almost 300 years, but he lives on in hundreds of his instruments and the music they produce. Your years of suffering, of thin rings, may very well be what God will use now and or later to make a Stradivarius quality violin's music of praise and glory come forth. Give your questions, your sorrow, your fears, and your hopes to Jesus today. His absence is not because he doesn't love you, after all. His reticence to cure you or fix your brokenness is not because he is cruel or indifferent to your suffering. Those years of drought and darkness may very well produce little growth now, thin rings. But in due time, in the right hands, may the music of our life be worth it all. He is the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? I do. I do. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. The fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above. And when we asunder part, it gives us inward pain, but we shall still be joined in heart and hope to meet again. May God bless you, saints and siblings, with his hope, his faith, his love. Let your life sing. Let the music of these thin rings come forth.